Welcome back to Be Productive. We are talking about cybersecurity. In this day and age, we are hearing about security threats day in and day out. And we don't want to be fearful of them. We want to be informed about them. So, to help me with this discussion, I am bringing in my friend and cybersecurity expert, Greg Schaefer. Greg, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Clara.
Nobody wants to talk about cybersecurity because, again, it instills a lot of fear, but it is something that businesses need to pay attention to because it is happening. It's an everyday occurrence right now. And with it happening so frequently, there's new trends and new ways of dealing with it and facing it each and every day. So, what are some of the current trends that we're seeing in cybersecurity, some of the threats that are out there, and how we can better prepare for them?
Well, one thing that doesn't change is the motivation because the criminals are obviously out to try to get something. Most of the times, it's the cash payment or some sort of payment. Sometimes it's more like defacing a website or something along those lines. So long as the motivation persists, the threats will persist. But the actual threats change. You might recall that a few years ago, one of the big threats out there with credit cards was credit card skimming, credit card fraud, and all of that. But then we moved to what they call chip and pin, and now you insert the card, and things are a lot more secure. So what did the criminals do? They shifted to another thing, ransomware. Ransomware now is like one of the biggest things out there as far as threats go. It's been that way for a little while. And eventually ransomware will run its course, but then the criminals will go somewhere else. But ransomware works now because people pay the ransom. And you might think, well, why would they pay the ransom? The FBI says, well, that's not really a good idea. But the thing about it is that with your business, if your business is on the line, you're going to have to do everything that you can in order to make sure that the business actually survives. So ransomware still here, will be here for a while, but now we've got some other threats that are coming in. Generative AI is, or artificial intelligence is one of those things that is such a buzzword now. People know it more commonly probably as Chat GPT is one of the examples out there. And where this comes into play with regards to threats is that fraudsters use phishing a lot. That's the emails that try to trick you to do something. And most of the time, security folks like me, we would say, well, it's easy to figure out if it's a phish because usually the email is got some bad grammar in it or spelling errors or it just doesn't sound right. But now you can use generative AI to create an email that sounds exactly like what, say, your CEO would send. And it's a very difficult thing to overcome. Folks are using generative AI, for example, to create voice impersonations. We've got a serious problem now with calls where folks will try to convince, say, grandparents that their grandchild is kidnapped, and they've used the generative AI to replicate the voice. And then that's actually getting into now another risk called deep fakes. One of my favorite stories with regards to deep fakes, and a deep fake is where you, like, if you and I are talking right now and it looks like Greg, sounds like Greg, but it really isn't Greg. Well, you might think, well, that sounds pretty out there, but it's a serious risk that's been exploited. And one example from earlier this year was where an executive was in a meeting with the other executives of the company, and during this Zoom meeting, it was a Zoom call, they decided that they needed to wire $25 million to some place because of some business reason. It had to be done now. Well, everybody's there, everybody agreed, so it seems like it'd be fine, except the other five people in the Zoom call were deepfakes. They weren't who they looked or sounded like. So this gets to be a very, very serious issue. So these are all the things, and you might think it's like, well, I'm a small business. They won't try to deepfake me. If they have something you want, they'll figure out a way to try to get it.
Yeah. Wow. That is just crazy. With all of these changes happening, so rapidly, what should an organization do to kind of stay in front of all these evolving threats?
One of the best pieces of advice, it's part of a government campaign that's been around for at least 13 years. It's called Stop, Think, and Connect. And it's all about slowing down and awareness. So think about those words for a minute. Stop. It's just stop what you're doing for a minute. And then think about, does it make sense what you're about to do? So many times folks that don't think that they're going to fall for these things actually do. And anybody can fall for these if they don't really understand or just take a moment to pause. That's what the criminals try to do. They try to take advantage of rushing you through it. So figure out, does it make sense? Does it seem off somehow? And then go ahead and try to connect. Now, other things that you want to do, of course, is you want to protect your cyber infrastructure within your business. We talk about that with firewalls, making sure your home network is up to date on firmware and all of that. This is never a one and done process. It's an ongoing thing. A lot of times these things can happen in the background. Your computer automatically updates. Sometimes it happens at a most inopportune moment, and you're like, I don't want to have to boot it again right now, but you have to do that. And then also monitoring as best as you can. We say in large businesses that you want to make sure that you're paying attention to what's on your network, to what's going on in your machines. And it sounds like that's a pretty complicated thing, but there are certain things you can do in smaller businesses to check logs and so forth on what is going on in your infrastructure. And then the final thing is always pay attention to the news that's out there. News reports are great for understanding what threats could be out there. And they sometimes leverage news events that are out there as well too to get you to click on things. So just awareness is what it really comes down to.
Gosh. And again, it's just everywhere. And I think the misnomer is it only happens to large corporations, but we're seeing it more and more with even smaller companies. So you are the expert. You've been doing this for well over a decade and really have a great, pulse point on these. So what role does a company such as yours play in helping to keep up with the current trends and again protect these companies?
Well, a virtual CISO lives in the security world. It's what we do. It's kind of like I always like to use the comparison with an accountant. You use money. We all use money. We back in the day we had checkbooks. Now I don't think many people use checkbooks per se, but it's the same concept. But that doesn't mean that you need to be a certified accountant. You don't have that expertise. You need to hire someone for that, and that's what the virtual CISO does. We stay abreast with trends and technologies not only through news reports and feeds and all that, but we have other clients. And sometimes the other clients are some of the best sources for us to understand that something is going on. If we hear from two or three folks within an hour, it's like, hey, we noticed something. Well, that might be a trend that there's a new threat out there that isn't even on the news wires at all. So usually with your virtual CISO, you've got somebody that has this experience and certifications, with a CPA. Well, I was going to say with an accountant, they have the certification, the CPA. With information security, we have something called the CISSP, and that basically means that we are trained, we keep up with that training. We have to keep up with it with what they call continuing professional education or CPE credits. And all of that is what we can bring to you because as a small business owner, you're more concerned about making sure that your business is operating correctly and being productive. The security stuff, leave to other folks. We'll help
Yeah.
you out.
Absolutely. And that's why we bring people like you on is because you are the experts. And as leaders, I think about working with somebody like you as insurance for the company because should something happen, that's going to zap your productivity, not just for one day, not even for a week, but it could take you off the grid for months, depending on the size of your organization. So
Hmm.
being able to work with someone like you, an expert who's going to again set us up and watch for those trends ahead of us to be able to protect us is just huge. So where is the best place for our viewers to find you? Because people need to really again be reaching out and bringing in experts like you as strategic partners.
The best place is to go to our website, vcisoservices.com or vcisoservices.com. And we have a contact page there. We have a phone number there for old-fashioned contacts if you want. But really, the most efficient is a button on the first page that says book an appointment or schedule an appointment. And that'll get you a 15-minute call with myself or one of our lead senior virtual CISOs. And we can talk about what your issue is and how we might be able to help.
Love it. Oh, Greg, thank you so much for looking out for us and for sharing all these tips with us. And for those of you that are watching, I would go to the website and book a call with Greg and his team. Again, it doesn't matter the size of your organization. We are all opening ourselves up each and every day that we're open for business. The threat is out there. So protect yourself, protect your team, protect your level of productivity, and get yourself set up to make sure that should the worst happen, you're going to be prepared for it. So stay tuned because we'll be right back with more Be Productive.